Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. On the satellite out west, big storm out here over the western Aleutians. Komodorsky Island's actually the center very close to there with Kamchatka Peninsula in this area. Cold air coming in out of the Russian Far East across the Sea of Okhotsk, and that brought some pretty good winds, gusts over 60 miles an hour to the western Aleutians with gales. As that moved eastward, slowly beginning to diminish a little bit, but still we're seeing pretty good winds and rain into the central Aleutians. Another development down in this area right there, that's going to be moving up to the northeast and bringing some wind and rain into the a little bit farther to the east into the eastern Aleutians, but initially it's going to cause that frontal boundary as it comes up to stall right over Atka Island. So in for kind of a prolonged period of rain there, and eventually that'll actually hold it back from the Fox Islands. We'll get a brushing of rain here later tonight and early tomorrow, but the main front will hold back to the west for a little longer there as this low comes northward and gives more of a east-southeast flow out ahead of it. Otherwise, the Gulf of Alaska, we had that development yesterday, moved right on in, the main portion over the southern southeast coast. That's where the rainfall was the heaviest today, although there was a band of clouds hanging back here over the northern areas with some showers. A lot of showers falling in behind, up over an inch of rain in the last 24 hours at a net. By contrast, Juneau just 28 hundredths of an inch, and Yakutat about 39 hundredths of an inch. So definitely the heaviest rainfall occurring there and out in the Aleutians. But there was some moisture over the interior, as evidenced by this area of clouds that associated with an upper level trough that's pulling northward and eventually is going to push off to the east as high pressure builds in here out over the western Bering ahead of this incoming frontal system that's going to be moving across the area. So this moisture right along the Alaska Range, some light snow, McGrath, and a little bit heavier than what McGrath had over toward the Alaska Range there on the western slopes, and that extended right up in through the central interior into the Koyukuk Valley, and about 1 to 2 inches falling in areas up here over the north central part of the state. Bettles, for example, in the Koyukuk Valley had about 0.11 inches water equivalent, and that could work out anywhere to 1 to over 2 inches of snow. And they had about 5 inches on the ground this afternoon on the measurement. Barrow picked up 3/100ths of an inch water equivalent of precipitation there, and they've got 4 inches on the ground. There were some flurries back out to the west here and again the southwest, mostly right along this area here and then a little east or west of there. Showers south central Alaska, Kenai Peninsula, but nothing too heavy or widespread. More so here along the eastern Gulf Coast as this band lifts northward, but the main push off to the east there and the jet stream a little bit farther to the south now across the Queen Charlotte's in toward British Columbia. And here's the next system out to the west, moving across the low hanging back a little bit there. So that front's going to begin to weaken and its eastward advancement will slow, especially with the development down to the south. It's going to stall out right in about this area for the next, well, at least tonight and into tomorrow. And so you'll get a little bit of moisture from this area moving through the eastern Aleutians tonight, and then that should tend to shut off here. You can see some drier air coming up as this system here pulls up toward the, almost toward Atka Island there. And that tends to make this frontal boundary kind of go back to the west a little bit there, and the main push up to the north. So look for snow to move on to the southwest coast, especially Nunivak Island, Kuskokwim Bay northward, and those winds will be on the increase as well across St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, high pressure builds inland, both at the surface and the loft, with a high center over the interior. Another one down there south of Kodiak Island, and the stronger one up over the Arctic northwest of Barrow. So a lot of clear skies in through this area. There will be some persistent areas of moisture, mostly in the form of light snow or snow showers along the mountainous areas like the Alaska Range down the west side there and up into the Tanana Valley, the White Mountains, and on to the northeast, as well as off to the east here. Still have low pressure off the coast of the Panhandle, so it's going to stay showery, and actually another band forming there, and that will be moving in late tonight and tomorrow. But the main storm energy area is down to the south, at least for now, but this whole area is going to begin to lift northward a little bit, as we'll see. Well, not so much tomorrow. It's still the frontal boundary down in this area and still under the influence of low pressure off the coast. So occasional showers for the Panhandle again tonight and tomorrow, drying out along the North Gulf Coast with some clearing periods, especially Cook Inlet on down to possibly Kodiak Island. Won't clear it out completely, but under high pressure, winds will be quite light, especially Chillicothe Strait down to about Chignik and up into Bristol Bay. Pretty light winds tomorrow all along the western interior, but winds picking up along the coast, and that'll be mostly again, Nunivak Island up along the Yukon Delta coast and then back across St. Lawrence Island. Look for gusts possibly 40 miles an hour with small craft advisories, possibly gale force winds, maybe in advance of the front as it moves up to the north, but not so much down here, just rain and southerly winds there for the Pribilof Islands. And then this system pulling up to the north, timing a little difficult on that. It may not actually get to this position until tomorrow evening. But the result's the same. Should have a dry day mostly. There'll be some clouds, but the heaviest rain will be back to the south and west there over toward Atka, and some moisture showing up along the southern coast of the Alaska Peninsula. Should be a pretty good day though over Cold Bay, just some variable clouds and colder with snow showers all the way back over the far western Bering there into the Shimia Attu area, but that should stay west of Adak. And then we still have a trough here over the interior with a band of light snow or flurries along that, and then scattering out either side to again partly to mostly cloudy conditions over the Copper River Basin, clearing out though up along the Brooks Range and the North Slope areas. So temperatures dropping into the -20s, -30s overnight, and staying pretty chilly even along the Arctic coast. It looks like especially the western coast should be VFR, mostly clear skies. But that northeast flow coming around the high keeps the east side a little more vulnerable to seeing some low stuff, reduced flying conditions, but nothing in the way of any strong winds at all. For the outlook for Wednesday, the winds do increase a little bit here for the Bering Strait. Again, pretty windy for St. Lawrence Island. This front really weakening, just a weak trailing edge coming across the Pribilofs now as far as precipitation goes, but there's enough of a gradient here to probably keep small craft advisories in. Gusts 30, 35 miles an hour out of the south-southeast there from the Pribilofs right down to the Alaska Peninsula. And then this system will probably get some gale force, even possibly a narrow band of storm force winds out in advance of that front as it lifts northward. It'd be right in this area here, otherwise just some gale force winds, small craft advisories around that, and then really dropping off here back to the west in the cooler air. So snow St. Lawrence Island up into the Bering Strait. At least the western portions of the Seward Peninsula will see a chance of snow, and that's a misplaced symbol right there. Should be dry here over the interior, just about all of the interior under the influence of high pressure. Strong center up there near the Mackenzie River Delta, another one up over the Arctic there, and you can see ridging all the way down across Kodiak Island and Bristol Bay, and also into Northwest Territories here. East-northeast flow, so it's going to be pretty gusty on the winds here, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, and as well as some of the channeled areas here over the inside waters with the lower pressure down to the south, trying to make a push back to the north a little bit here, bringing a chance of rain probably into Dixon Entrance. Wednesday will be the best chance, just a slight risk here in the southern areas, but should stay dry with mostly clear skies for the remainder of the coast on up to the northwest, including Prince William Sound and the Copper River Basin. Some of this will be lingering on the eastern or the northern slopes of the eastern Alaska Range, like Northway into Tok in that area, and so kind of breezy at times for places like Delta and possibly Eagle as well. but definitely here, Copper River Delta looking a little gusty on the winds, as well as the northern central southeast coast. Then for today, temperatures over there were mostly in the upper 30s to mid 40s, with a 45 down at Metlakatla, 40 degrees in Juneau, with a 36 over at Yakutat. Same thing at Cordova, 29 in Palmer, 30 degrees Kenai, 32, though at Wasilla, 5 degrees in Gulkana. Same thing at Fairbanks, 5 above zero, 9 degrees. That's at Minchumina, 13 McGrath, and an 18 at Sleepmute. Up to the north, anywhere from a little below zero to a little above, -5 at Bettles, to 9 degrees at Tanana, and 18 below Arctic Village. Cold spot this afternoon at 4 p.m., 7 degrees Anaktuvik, and Arctic Coast, Nuix at -9, up to 9 above at Point Lay. And in the teens over the Kotzebue Sound area, that's Buckland with -4, 1 above at Selawik. Kotzebue 5, 14, Shishmaref, 10 degrees at Nome. And otherwise lower teens here over the mid-valley areas to, or lower valleys to near 20. You get down toward Bethel with 21 there at Makoriak, and Amonik at 18. Much warmer, though, south of the Alaska Range here. Temperatures, as I mentioned, in the upper 20s, lower 30s, and into the mid-30s to near 40 here. Bristol Bay, lower 40s from Homer, Kodiak, Akiak, Chignik, and Sandpoint, all 41 or 42 degrees. Otherwise, upper 30s here to near 40, again out toward the Unalaska area. Mid-30s for the Pueblos, mid-40s for the Central Aleutians, and then back down to 40 for Shemya. Lows tonight below zero. Well, again, as cold as maybe 31 below again up here over the north slope over to the east like Arctic Village had. Otherwise, should be above zero or near it here through the central interior, Tanana Valley. Mostly in the 20s, lower 30s to the south, mid to upper 20s Bristol Bay, upper 30s for the Aleutians, and the southeast coast in the 30s. Highs tomorrow, mostly in the 40s, upper 30s to upper 40s there for the Panhandle. Otherwise, 25 to 33 degrees here, south central Alaska, 30s for Bristol Bay to near 40 along the Alaska Peninsula or a little above, all the way out to Adak and Atka. And again, areas staying below zero, especially over the north slope into the Brooks Range, but near zero on the coastal areas. Teens out here to the west, and flying conditions. A band of IFR with marginal conditions extending southwestward and southward over the Talkeetnas, possibly down into the Prince William Sound area, western Prince William Sound. Could stay out IFR there in areas and then improve gradually in the afternoon. Maybe showing up along the Chugach Range, but mostly up to the north and back to the west here. Heavier stuff out with the front as it pushes up to the Yukon Delta coast. Conditions coming down, visibility ceilings of St. Lawrence Island, all the way down into the Aleutians. And not too bad here over the southeast coast. Still some lower stuff with some showers yet to move through tomorrow. Mostly off the coast, and a widespread area of IFR from, well, the Alaska Peninsula here all the way out to Atka. And again, the Arctic coast, east side, marginal VFR, risk of some IFR at times, but offshore flow should keep it a little better, and at least keep the IFR out to the west and northwest. Moving on to passes, Anaktuvik, marginal becoming VFR at times. Again, same forecast for Adigan. That should be marginal VFR becoming VFR. That would actually be the reverse there. Lake Clark, marginal VFR will become VFR. Merrill may hang VFR a little longer. And farther to the north, rainy looking kind of marginal with a risk of some IFR on the western approach in the morning hours. And for windy, IFR should become marginal. And for Isabel, IFR will become marginal during the day. And Mentesta, just call it marginal at times. Tanita, possibly marginal VFR at times tomorrow, especially before the afternoon. And for Portage, marginal VFR, possibly starting out IFR in the eastern entrance, but it could go VFR during the afternoon on both sides. Chilkoot and White, marginal. For the freezing levels, you can see 2,000 feet here in the Gulf of Alaska. There's actually some warmer air kind of backing around from the southeast there, and a little bit below that down here. And where the isotherms are closest together, that's usually where the jet stream is. And that's about where it's pushing down to the south there. The surface right along the coastline, push of warm air ahead of the storm coming into the Bering Sea, but not all that warm, 2,000 to 4,000 feet there. and the surface all the way up into Russia. Icing with that southerly wind flow, a lot of moisture, areas of moderate rime icing, occasional widespread here, Nunivak Island up to St. Lawrence Island, and kind of a break in this area. Then you've got a better chance of moderate rime below 12,000 feet from Adak into Atka. And again, that's staying, having trouble getting into the eastern Aleutians. And some areas of icing here of either the mixed or rime varieties, mostly below 9,000 feet over the southeast coast, and some hit and miss possibilities up the east side. Wind flow chart tomorrow shows the trough that's now over to the west, moving eastward, and tomorrow afternoon, high pressure building in behind. As you can see, the jet stream arcing up through the Bering Sea back to that southerly flow, then northwesterly 50 to 75 knots and across the southern panhandle. The Arctic jet now kind of slipping to the east, and the main jet south of the Aleutians. At 9,000 feet, could see some 30-knot winds here through the east central interior out of the west-southwest, but pretty darn light, getting variable here with the high pressure. Light winds, so a weak low here along the southeast coast, but the strongest jet here are the winds at 9,000 and 3,000 feet, 35 to 50 knots up into the Bering Sea, and then a little farther to the west there, you can see around this high, 30 to 35 knots south, taking a turn to the northwest, St. Lawrence Island ahead of the front, and a weak pressure pattern over the interior, southeast coast, and even the Arctic coast, except for the west side there. Turbulence looking like this, maybe some isolated moderate chop over the eastern Arctic coast areas there. Otherwise smooth through the interior, smooth through the panhandle, moderate bumpiness showing up along the Yukon Delta coast, pushing up to St. Lawrence Island, extending south into the eastern Aleutians. And after hangar flying, I'll return to the marine forecasts.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. I've been hosting this program for almost 7 years, and I've always had a guest on, many guests, in fact about over 200, talking about different phases of aviation. But this evening I decided that I was just going to talk to you directly, because there is a technology and equipment available now that can be a game changer for general aviation in Alaska and in fact in the world. What I'm talking about is the angle of attack indicator, the angle of attack system. Let's start with a little very basic aerodynamics. Angle of attack is the angle between the chord line, a line that runs straight through the wing, and the relative wind. There is what is known as a critical angle of attack, where that wing, when it reaches critical angle of attack, it no longer creates lift, and therefore is going to essentially fall out of the sky, or it's going to depart controlled flight. The Navy developed angle of attack instruments probably 50 years ago. They've used them ever since then, and the Air Force picked up the idea not too long after that. If you were going to land on a ship, all you really needed was the angle of attack in the cockpit, showing what the attitude of the aircraft is, and I think they call it the meatball on the carrier deck, with the landing officer making sure you're going to land where he wanted you to on the deck. Angle of attack information is incredibly valuable. Now you might say, well, what about airspeed? Well, you know what? Airspeed can lie to you. Airspeed and its correlation with things like stall speeds the stall speed, for example, is dependent on gross weight, pressure altitude, or density altitude, and the G's you might be pulling. And it changes. Angle of attack is always constant. The critical angle of attack is where the aircraft is going to depart controlled flight. You no longer have lift. Why is that important to you as a general aviation flyer? Because a couple of months ago, the NTSB and the FAA got together and did a remarkable thing, realizing that we all need to make a dent in the fatal and serious injury accidents, FSI, They did something with angle of attack that I'm going to explain in just a second that was, I think, remarkable. Keep in mind, and I've said this before, that 40% of fatalities in general aviation are from loss of control. It could be on landing, it could be on takeoff, it could be the infamous moose stall in Alaska, but it's loss of control. You've also heard me talk about the importance of emergency maneuver training in the Department of the Interior. All of our pilots go through it. That's very valuable. And it shows you how to recover from stalls and spins. But I will tell you there's a better way to do it, and that is to avoid loss of control altogether. Because if you're at 250 feet and you lose control, you depart the airplane, I don't care how good you are, you probably are not going to recover before you hit the ground. So why not avoid it in the first place? The thing that the FAA and the NTSB did was they made installation of AOA systems on GA aircraft, certificated aircraft, a simple logbook entry. You don't need an STC, you don't need anything more, and consequently, the price of these instruments and getting them installed is much, much less than it would have been if the FAA had required that they require an STC as a major piece of equipment. Now there are some caveats with the use of it, but the bottom line is it's been made available for general aviation. And what I'm going to do is next time I want you to tune in to our program, and I'm going to bring you an AOA simulator and show you exactly what it looks like in the cockpit. What I'm holding here is 10-year-old technology. This was an angle of it. I mean, the technology's been there. This was an AOA gauge, but it was analog. And I contend that that's not what you need. And I'm going to show you next time a system that's very pilot friendly, that will alert you and your passengers when you're even getting close to high angles of attack, not even approaching the critical angle of attack. So ladies and gentlemen, tune in next week and we'll talk about AOA gauges and why I think they're so important for general aviation and why I'd love to see them on every Cub and every aircraft in Alaska. Until next time, fly safe.
Welcome back. Well, no heavy winds expected here for the southeast coast. Light variable conditions down along the central and south coast, southeast to east, 15 to 20 for the north side. And Lincoln Glacier Bay, kind of a gradual increase in those northerly winds. Call it 25 knots, higher gusts tomorrow, northeast 20 in the central areas, southeast 15 for the southern inside waters. And then for Wednesday, north 30 knots, Lincoln Glacier Bay, higher gusts, and again, higher gusts all through these areas with that northeast wind, anywhere from 20 to 25 knots, maybe a little lighter right through here. For the North Gulf Coast, easterlies becoming northeast, 20 knots, northeast 15 for Prince William Sound, and northerlies at about 15 there for all the marine zones from Kamishak Bay, the Barrens, down the east side of Kodiak Island, and Shelikof Strait with that same pattern up Cook Inlet, but lighter north of the Forelands. And that light wind condition continues, basically north or north-northeast, except right here over the Barrens, maybe northwest, 10 to 15 knots, 20 knots maybe here for the North Gulf Coast, but pretty light winds up into Prince William Sound. For the Bristol Bay area, east at 10, light variable winds, again, high pressure ridge right over this area, so no wind there tomorrow, gradually becoming south and southeast, could come up to 20 knots in the afternoon for the peninsula. And then the outlook for Wednesday, small craft advisories here for the Alaska Peninsula, and a little bit of an increase, but still light there for Kodiak Island, and light variable winds again, southwest Sitkinak over to about Chignik, and then you'll probably see something higher than that by the time you get to Sandpoint. For the eastern Aleutian southeasterlies, kind of a range there from Unalaska and southeast 20 Gale force winds just southwest of Nikolsky tomorrow, and then kind of a north to northeast condition. And actually these gales may not come up until maybe tomorrow evening, but they will be coming up eventually. And northeast and more variable back to southwest here for the western areas. And then again, that low pressure area more back toward AKwx, so it could see some possible storm force winds, but more likely some gales, but not all that big of an area. Small craft advisories for the Fox Islands, 20 knots on either side. For the southeast, or for the Bering Sea here, in the southeast, Bering southeast winds, 15 to 20 knots, and getting stronger. Could see 40 knots out of the east ahead of that front tomorrow. And then those will drop back to small craft advisories from the southeast along the coast, east there for the northern Bering, southeast 30 knots for the Pribilofs. Arctic coast, north to northeast, 15 knots on the east side, central coast, easterlies at 20, 25 knots here over a portion of the west coast, otherwise 20 knots on down toward the Bering Strait. For Wednesday, lighter winds here, east-northeast, pretty light, 10 to maybe up to 15 knots on the central coast. That's about where the gradient starts to increase there, and seems to be the strongest for the Chukchi, or for Kotzebue Sound into the southeast Chukchi Sea. And for Wednesday, or already did Wednesday, for tonight, here's the system pushing in. Should spread some snow and low wind into the coastline, more so up towards St. Lawrence Island. Rain south Pribilofs all the way to the eastern Aleutians, but heaviest back here to the west as this pulls up. Showers over the Panhandle, flurries over the mountains, to maybe some light snow, resulting in an inch or so. And that diminishes but holds up here on Tuesday. The front mostly staying out to the west. There's that next storm pushing up to the Aleutians, and showers continue over the Panhandle, but end for sunshine on Wednesday and cooler conditions, and this all sliding off to the northwest. That's a look at the weather. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.